This is Outnumbered. I'm Harris Faulkner. Here today, Town Hall editor and Fox News contributor Katie Pavlich, Democrat strategist and Fox News contributor Jessica Tarlov, commentator and Fox News contributor Rachel Campos Duffy, and joining us in the center seat, Republican strategist and founder and partner of Caldwell Strategic Consulting, Gianno Caldwell, is outnumbered. This is a big day.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
I'm wearing pink. Either I'm ready for Outnumbered or church.
Hey! Sometimes it feels the same. Some people like to preach. I don't know. Anyway, welcome.
Thank you.
Let's get to the news. We are awaiting an announcement from President Trump, as I mentioned, on the Iran nuke deal. He says that this afternoon he will reveal his decision on whether the U.S. will remain in that agreement. He campaigned, promising to pull out of it, and has called the deal insane. The world is watching to see what he does. Iran's vice president says ahead of the announcement, only the naive would now negotiate with the U.S. The president's announcement comes after a series of recent visits, from European leaders urging him to stay in the deal. And after Republican chairman of the House Armed Services Committee, Mac Thornberry, suggested he delay the May 12th deadline for making the decision. Today, Congressman Thornberry suggested the president may choose a third option. Watch.
I assume that he will at least withdraw from part of it, but that's why I say the question is how much of it. There's a range of options here. You can either stay all the way in, get all the way out, or a whole lot in between, and that's what none of us know.
Kevin Corke is live for us at the White House. Kevin.
Harris, good afternoon. You'd be hard-pressed to find just about anyone who doesn't believe the president will ultimately pull out of the Iran nuclear deal, if not in whole, certainly in part this afternoon when he makes that announcement at about 2 o'clock this afternoon. But then again, he can be unpredictable. He has, we know this, listened, as you pointed out, to a chorus of calls for the U.S. to stay in and strengthen the accord, notably from the leaders of France and Germany. In fact, Fox News has been reporting this morning he spoke by telephone again with President Macron of France just today. But while the number of world leaders and stakeholders have been asking and pleading that the president reconsider his plans to pull out, well, White House officials remain steadfast in their belief that the Iranian leadership, that is, simply hasn't lived up to their end of the bargain, and that has consequences.
One of the concerns, in fact, is that there's been limitations on the ability to actually do inspection visits into Iran onto the nuclear sites. But I think, again, if they were abiding by the spirit of the deal, they wouldn't be fomenting unrest, targeting innocent civilians, funding terrorism across the Middle East, continuing to send intercontinental ballistic missiles to rebels that are fighting against our allies.
Mark Short earlier here on Fox News in this very spot. Meanwhile, in Tehran, well, they're insisting they've not only lived up to the deal, Harris. They say any decision by the U.S. to void the agreement would be met with even more production within their nuclear program, about which President Trump famously said this.
It won't be so easy for them to restart.
Mr. President,
They're not going to be restarting anything. They restart it, they're going to have big problems, bigger than they've ever had before. And you can mark it down. They restart their nuclear program, they will have bigger problems than they have ever had before. Thank you very much, everybody.
You heard him say it. Mark it down. Bigger problems than they have ever had before. We'll be watching very carefully for the nuance in the language as the president makes his announcement, Harris, shortly after 2 o'clock this afternoon. Of course, we'll have live coverage for you here on Fox News. But for now, back to you.
Kevin Corke, thank you very much. You know, Gianno, it's interesting that just a few hours ago, Iran had another kind of twist in their response, and that is, well, maybe we would stay in the deal depending on what could be worked out.
Yeah, and they know that the economic sanctions would completely stifle them. Of course, companies that do business with the U.S., if there's sanctions, they wouldn't be able to do that business with Iran anymore. I think the president has been very clear when it comes to this deal. He's called it stupid, and he said the folks that negotiated it was stupid. It didn't address the ballistic missiles program. It didn't prevent Iran from developing nuclear weapons permanently, and that's been an issue. And it doesn't address the wars in Syria and Yemen that Iran has been involved in and actively participating in. So for anyone to believe that the president is going to stick with this deal as is, I think would not know the president and his strategies, because he's been quite clear on this. I think what he really should do is have a long-range plan where he allows for those that are involved in a pact currently to come to the table and try to come up with a better solution.
Can I ask you just a quick question about that before we open it up wider to the couch? So that has been offered up, not by Democrats, but maybe they're talking about, you know, what could it look like down the road if we give everybody a chance to diplomatically get together in those other countries. But are you talking about a delay, or does the president do what he has to do today but leaves the door open to come back in a couple of weeks? How would you see it?
I would think that the president would leave the door open. I absolutely do believe that he would do a delay and leave the door open for those that come to the table so they can get a better deal. At this point, the president has all the power. And, of course, the U.S., if they're out of the deal, a lot of other folks will pull out as well.
Do you think that's the case? Because we know from reporting that, well, we knew when France and Germany and their leadership was here last week that the president was talking with the leaders about the Iran deal.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with Giano here. I think that leaving the door open and taking a delay, not saying we're going out, and then leaving us in this kind of amorphous place for God knows how long will be his approach. But I think now he has a team that is firmly on the same side as him vis-a-vis the Iran deal with Pompeo and John Bolton, that he's much more emboldened to be doing this and to be taking that kind of action. And it will be interesting to see what kind of proposals the French team and the German team actually can come up with to adequately address the missiles and whatever violations the Iranians could make in the future. We do know that they haven't violated the deal thus far, but down the road, well, we do.
Lying into the deal is a violation of the deal. Initially.
Well, it's something that all parties had accepted.
Well, they didn't know about a lot of this intelligence. They didn't know that they had plans for nuclear weapons.
There was
they
nothing
lied going into the deal. That is a fact.
What Bibi Netanyahu presented last week was not new information.
Yes, it was.
No.
Yes, it was.
Wait a second.
Okay, well, lying their way into the deal is a violation of the deal. The Iranians said from the beginning they were not interested in building a nuclear weapon. We now know that they not only planned to do it, but they also still held on to their nuclear program. So when the sunset clause went into effect, they could go back to their program and start developing those weapons again. So that is a violation going into the deal, not only of good faith, but also of the parameters of the deal. But I think it's important to point out that the president isn't, if he decides to leave the deal, he's not going to get up there and just leave the United States of America or the world in a lurch. He's going to have options on the table for how to move forward, which is important. But again, this is not just about the nuclear agreement. This is about Iran's overall behavior. This is about Hezbollah operating in Syria and Lebanon. This is about Hezbollah targeting Americans. And it's about Iran's influence being emboldened, not pulled back as a result of this agreement.
By the way, the violent language toward Israel in recent days from Iran, saying that they are retaliating from something that Israel has denied taking part in, that violent language has now garnered reports of Hezbollah getting more involved in whatever Iran's plan would be. That is problematic. And so perhaps, Rachel, the president would do something like get out of certain parts of the deal and say we need to renegotiate these certain parts.
Yeah, it's interesting that, you know, in a city full of leaks, we don't even know what he's really doing.
And he tweeted what was happening, so he doesn't have to leak anything. He just tells us.
That's right. Well, what's interesting is the president right now has maximum leverage. You brought up great points. I mean, the way the international global financial system works is you can't not do business with New York City in those spaces. So the Iranians know that the president has great leverage. He also has a great relationship with Macron. And if you recall, during his visit, he said, we could maybe do a different deal. And so maybe that's what that call this morning was about.
I just want to make the point that the Europeans are looking at this from a business perspective.
That's right.
Follow the money. The allies in the Middle East are looking at it from a safety and terrorism perspective when they're right next door. So as they're saying we should stay in, they have a financial incentive to be doing business with Iran, and they're going to have to make a choice about who is more important to them.
Well, and certainly we saw that number north of $5 billion in terms of Germany and their business with Iran right now, which makes it, as you say, more complicated. Let's stay on the subject, but do it this way. President Trump is blasting former Secretary of State John Kerry again today. This after it was revealed that Kerry has been meeting with Iran's foreign minister, among others, in an effort to save the nuclear deal that he helped negotiate. President Trump tweeted this today: John Kerry can't get over the fact that he had his chance and blew it. Stay away from negotiations, John. You are hurting your country. And White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders weighed in this way.
I don't think that we would take advice from somebody who created what the president sees to be one of the worst deals ever made. I'm not sure why we would start listening to him now.
You know, Gianno, it's interesting because when we hear of our people, like anybody going over to a foreign country, can you imagine people sitting down with Kim Jong-un at this point and trying to talk to him before? I mean, that...
Dennis Rodman.
Yeah, Dennis Rodman.
I know.
Those were the days.
But that kind of, you know, what I've heard termed is step-on diplomacy is something that really is not looked at positively.
Right, yeah, and I think John Kerry, there's been a lot of talk about him violating the Logan Act. I don't think he would do that. I think he's going to be very careful not to. But what I do believe he would do is go to these other countries. As you know, he's been meeting with presidents of other countries and giving them insight as to how we do things, almost like a consultant, and saying, hey, if the president does X, this is what you should do to counter. And I think, and in fact, the President Trump has called him stupid repeatedly for negotiating this deal. He does have an axe to grind. And with that being the case, he has even more incentive to try to save face and save this deal.
You know, Rachel, you and I talk a lot about legacy because that's part of politics, and you have a politician in your household. So I'm curious to know what those conversations with Representative Sean Duffy, your husband, have been like around this issue.
Well, I will say this because legacy is so important. If you saw the video, the documentary that came out on the last 12 months of the Obama administration, that administration was obsessed with their legacy, what looked like a failure. And by the way, if you watch it and you voted for Donald Trump, you might even feel better about your vote after watching this documentary. They are obsessed with this, and John Kerry might be offended by by him calling him stupid.
Certainly.
But if you look at what they were doing and their mindset, you would agree with Sarah Sanders completely. Why would we want to follow the advice of John Kerry, who's been wrong on so many things, not just in the Obama years, but even long before that, he's made bad calls?
You know, Jessica, you and I have talked about the side deals and the things that the American people have never seen with regard to the Iran agreement. Perhaps we're on the verge of maybe even finding out more information. Isn't that worth pushing a deadline or pushing back on this for Democrats?
I think so, absolutely. I think that pushing the deadline is a nice middle ground between the two positions here, people who want to preserve the deal but do accept the fact that we need better terms, and those who completely want to nix it. Because I don't think there is anyone right now out there with a viable new option who's saying here's a new complete deal that'll satisfy.
You think Democrats should have been working on that?
I'm not sure.
I mean, Adam Schiff reportedly last night yesterday wanted to see some of the intelligence around what happens if we don't recertify the Iran deal.
Well, totally. And I think that since President Trump's inauguration, that should have been what they were doing, because this is something that he was talking about on the campaign trail almost as much as that southern border wall.
Not a surprise.
Right? So this isn't a surprise, and hopefully, we don't know everything that's going on. They are prepared for this, and this is certainly something that Democrats who are trying to preserve the deal as a legacy item, I mean, this is John Kerry's Obamacare, if you look at it, right? I mean, President Obama will have the health care law, and he has the Iran deal and the climate deal, which is now looking like it's going away for us.
I understand the want and need to have more time on this, but the truth is that the president has actually pushed this off for a year and a half. So this is something President Trump said he was going to do when he first got into office. He's been in office for a year and a half now. They've had those deadlines. In January, he specifically called on Congress to get involved, and he called on the Europeans to come to the table now in May with options about how to make this work. They've been in town for the last couple of weeks, but it seems like, based on what we know so far, they haven't made a compelling statement.
And that's so candid what you're saying about people on the left, Jessica. You know, and I haven't heard that conversation about what they could have been doing, but when I read that House Intel, you know, the leadership of the Democrats on that committee was just now asking, and maybe he had before and it was just being reported, but wanted to see what would it look like necessarily if we did something different with regard to Iran. I'm thinking, gosh, that's such a year ago conversation.
Well, I do think that listening to people like Condoleezza Rice, who was here last week and said, this isn't going to be the end of the world if we pull out, I think that does trigger people to start thinking about this reality. Because Katie's right. It's been a year and a half, and that does give the president a lot of leverage, because he can say, I hate the deal, but I also want to make sure I'm listening to the the other parties. We're part of an international community. So he does win on that issue if we stay in the deal, and he continues to get to rail against it.
I think what also triggers people is this is the same regime that continues throughout this deal to say death to America. So the American people inherently, even if they don't know all the details going on in D.C. and in the international community, they just look at this regime and go, why should we trust these people?
Absolutely.
What we do know for sure is in a couple of hours, 2 p.m. Eastern, we were told to expect the president to make this decision on what he will do, certify or not recertify the Iran deal. So we will carry it live right here on Fox News Channel, FNC for the cool kids. Some of the president's critics in the media are now taking aim at First Lady Melania Trump after she announced her effort to battle cyber bullies and improve the lives of children. Is the criticism fair? We'll talk about it. Today, Gina Haspel is back on Capitol Hill, and a powerful Democrat senator may be causing new trouble for President Trump's pick for CIA director. We'll show you what her critics are now saying about her role in the interrogation of suspected terrorists. Stay close.
People will not know much of what the nominee was doing during that crucial period, and will not know a number of the facts I know that relate to her record and who she really is.
Fox News alert, new signs that Democrats in the Senate may be causing trouble for President Trump's nominee for CIA Director Gina Haspel. She was back on Capitol Hill today, meeting with lawmakers ahead of her Senate confirmation hearing tomorrow. Democrats are demanding the administration declassify more information regarding her role in the CIA's enhanced interrogation of alleged terrorists after 9/11. Here's one Democrat on the Senate Intelligence Committee, Ron Wyden, saying more information must be revealed before Haspel is confirmed.
If this is allowed to go forward as what I have called a secret confirmation process, it sure as heck won't be the last one. We'll see plenty of others.
Earlier, President Trump tweeting, quote, Gina Haspel, my highly respected nominee to lead the CIA, is being praised for the fact that she has been and always will be tough on terror. This is a woman who has been a leader wherever she has gone. The CIA wants her to lead them into America's brightest and glorious future. So, Gianno, it seems to me that she is the most qualified candidate for CIA director that we've ever seen, considering she's been in leadership and she's also been on the ground working with the rank and file agents in the CIA.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people have made comments, oh, most qualified woman, but most qualified person, and I really appreciate that fact. You know, it's interesting when we think about the terror program and what happened with interrogation. I think back to when 9/11 happened, when I was a freshman in high school in Simeon High School in Chicago, and how we all felt when we saw that plane hit that tower.
Right.
And when we saw the second one, which I thought was the video of the first one, and know that we were really under attack, everyone was afraid. All of us were scared and concerned, and we wanted to see something happen. So instead of us bad-mouthing her and trying to bash her, we should be giving her our thanks for serving our country honorably.
Right.
Now, I know there were some things that came out later on, but when you're a soldier in a fight, do you blame them for the strategy in which they was handed down? You absolutely don't. You congratulate them on doing the work in which they were ordered to do. And in this case, that should be how we approach her.
Yeah, Rachel, there have been a number of internal CIA reports that have cleared her of any kind of wrongdoing, saying she didn't order any of the interrogations. She was simply following orders. And at the time, it was deemed legal by Congress, right? So it wasn't until later. So the question is, why now is this becoming a political fight, considering she's been praised by both sides of the aisle?
Because there are Democrats that care a lot more about the resistance than they care about our national security. I will say this. My sister was a case officer in the clandestine service, and one of the things that happened after George Bush and when Obama came in is that human intelligence collection, which is the stuff that case officers do, not analysts, like, by the way, Brennan was an analyst, he kind of equated that. And so there was sort of an emasculating of the collection of human intelligence within the CIA. That's something that Gina Haspel was very much against. There's a reason why Pompeo picked her as the deputy. And also, I don't think we should underestimate the importance of having somebody at the top of the CIA who works so closely with the new Secretary of State. So I think there's a lot of really great reasons to pick her. I think Democrats are saying we support women as long as they're liberal.
Well, speaking of people in charge who have praised Gina Haspel, I want to play this soundbite from former CIA Director General Hayden on Face the Nation over the weekend.
Gina Haspel is the one woman I want in that room when everyone else will be going into north-south Autobob and saying, "You're right, boss." Gina Haspel won't. She'll be dedicated. Absolutely not.
Jusko, he seems to be saying that she will be a check on the administration, which Democrats seemed like they would want someone like that.
And Mike Morrell makes the same point as well. There are a number of them. This is actually a bipartisan issue in support of her from the intelligence community. I take about 50% of your point, which I think is a record for us. I think there are some Democrats that are out there for resistance purposes, but I think this is also part of a larger conversation about a societal shift that we've had about our attitude towards interrogation and those techniques. And you're completely right. I was a senior in high school, so I feel a little ancient then on 9/11, and I grew up in downtown Manhattan and was evacuated from my home. And it's something that is ever present for all of us, certainly when we're in the city, but in the country generally. And I think it's important to hold on to that. But the conversation that we will be having during her hearing tomorrow, I think, is an important one. The numbers are not on the Democrats' side here, and that's always underlying all of this. So if we can expose more information, if we can have more productive conversations about how we do these things, that's all a net positive for us. And I don't actually think this is a gender issue whatsoever. I think that if it was, there were concerns about Mike Pompeo because he was a fan of interrogation techniques, and we all remember General Mattis saying, "I do better with a six-pack and a pack of cigarettes," right? So I think that we need to move it back from the partisan side of this and talk about the real issue here.
But Harris, I want to bring it back to 9/11, right? Because the work that Gina Haspel has dedicated her life to is about keeping Americans safe. And she has not only been praised by people in positions at the CIA and across the government, but she's also been praised by 9/11 families who lost people in those towers and at the Pentagon.
So that means that Republicans have to step up in that hearing, too, and they've got to ask the kinds of questions that show her history with regard to that. But it's equally as important that we do get all the information that we can about something as a country that we have agreed upon.
Absolutely.
We don't want to return to the road of those types of techniques.
And she stated that, right, though?
Yeah, she has.
That.
But, just to point out what happened yesterday and last evening and what's happening today that's so important, she's walking into the fold on Capitol Hill. She's not a politician. And this is something that we've seen candidates do across the board, across administrations. But this is a hostile work environment for her in a way because we have made a cultural difference and decision about what her job was. Your soldier comment, though, is important. John Brennan was fourth in command. He was much closer to the top when these issues were talked about. She was much farther down the food line.
Correct.
So if we can get any information, I think it's helpful. But we've got to be fair about how we do it, and we've got to not make it about any other issue than national security.
Right.
So if, liberals care that much about women, then care about the ones that you don't agree with, too.
Exactly. And the fact that she isn't political at all, I think, is a net benefit.
She went to the Hill. She's back on the Hill today. She's taking these questions, and there were reports that she might consider withdrawing earlier in the week, but she didn't. And she's standing in the fold, and so let's ask every question we can. I haven't talked with a Democrat yet who thinks she will not be confirmed.
Right.
They say she will because they've got the numbers. But they also have the support because they realize how important it is to have somebody in the know at the top as well.
And somebody who understands the importance of human intelligence. So much of what we need to do to combat the terrorists has to be done with human intelligence. And so she is somebody who's fought that battle within the agency, is a champion for it. That's important. Also, shame on Rand Paul for not supporting. This is evidence.
We don't know
was
what
not,
he'll do in the end.
Right. Rand Paul has surprised us lately. But I just want to piggyback on that and say, I think that Gianno's point about the precedent that this could set for people who have served in the armed services and the intelligence community going forward, that something that you did because you were told to 20 years ago could come back and make it impossible for you to have a new job to run for office. That's a real
people might deviate.
Right. Whenever anybody serves, whether it's the military or because you are taking orders and you are part of an apparatus,
which you're supposed to be.
It doesn't mean that you're not sentient. about the decisions that you're making. And so that will be on display on the Hill. They'll ask
focusing
about it.
on her experience. She's been a station chief in 4 very dangerous countries. She speaks multiple languages. She has good relationships with the agents on the ground. So human intelligence.
She's got the pedigree.
And we don't want anyone to decide to capitulate to their own train of thought.
Right.
If there's decisions made like, okay,
well,
there we go.
Yeah, that's
we'll talk about that later.
The hearing will be tomorrow, and Fox News will have full coverage. But for now, a tough message from U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions, why this latest illegal immigration crackdown is sparking serious new debate.
We're here to send a message to the world that we're not going to let the country be overwhelmed. People are not going to caravan or otherwise stampede our border.
Stay glued to your TV or mobile device as we are awaiting for an announcement from President Trump on the Iran nuclear deal. He is preparing to tell the world whether he will follow through on his threat to withdraw from that agreement. No signs have emerged yet indicating his European allies or ours were able to convince him last week to stay in that deal. Iran's vice president says it is ready for any scenario, but adding that only the, quote, naive would now renegotiate with the United States. Naive? Is that how you would put it?
Maybe. Crackdown at the border. A stern warning to those who enter the U.S. illegally from Attorney General Jeff Sessions. The nation's top law enforcer announcing a zero-tolerance policy on illegal crossings, including by asylum seekers, even if it splits up families. Watch this.
I have put in place a zero-tolerance policy for illegal entry on our southwest border. If you cross the border unlawfully, then we will prosecute you. It's that simple. If you smuggle illegal aliens across our border, then we will prosecute you. If you are smuggling a child, then we will prosecute you. And that child may be separated from you as required by law.
Sessions' announcements come as the Border Patrol reports a surge in border crossings. Advocacy groups are blasting the move as cruel. Supporters of the policy say it is intended to discourage migrants from smuggling children across the border, which, of course, is extremely dangerous. So I'm going to go to you first, Katie. Is this cruel? Or is this a way to disincentivize parents from bringing their kids?
I want to take on this, the ripping apart families argument, okay? I've written about this. It is not a good thing that families get taken apart when the law is broken. But guess what? There are millions of American families whose families have been ripped apart because someone in their family broke the law and went to prison. It's no different. You break the law, there are consequences. This is no different. When it comes to them cracking down on human smuggling, I've always said that open borders are inhumane borders because the people who take advantage of these children, these mothers who are bringing them through Mexico, up from Honduras, El Salvador, other countries there, they are not good people. They are abusing them. They are raping them. I know the president has caught heat for that. It's a fact. It is true. Human Rights Watch has done a number of studies on this. They've documented this. So the law is there to protect people not only in the United States from illegal immigration, but also from those who are traveling here from being abused by human traffickers.
Okay, Jessica, is Katie right about that?
Well, she's right about the statistics, and I can't disagree with that. I think the New York Times has reported that since October, 700 children have been separated from their families in immigration tussles.
Right, but when Katie says that that this happens to prisoners here in the United States as well, I mean, they get separated from their kids too.
There seems to be, like an out clause, I guess it were, for a crime committed to get a better life. So the people who are going to prison in America, the idea is, and this is not everybody, I'm against, 3 strikes and all of that, but the idea is if you murder someone in the U.S., if you commit a crime that you deserve to go to prison, the people who are defending the illegal immigrants here would say, well, that's a little bit different. It's not, that's a violent crime, and this is a crime of love, as it were, to get a better life for you and your family, and they are escaping extremely bad circumstances. I'm sure I will be called a bleeding heart liberal for saying that, but I'm incredibly conflicted about this because it is so dangerous to make this journey. I mean, the stakes are so high, and they are running from a life that is so terrible, and we as a nation are open and embracing of those who are in search of a better life, but there are legal protocols, and we have 11 million who are here already illegally, and I think that we've basically given up on deporting them. I think that is what's going to happen here, so we need to have a solid framework for where we go from now.
You're a mom. Is this a crime? Is this a crime of love, as Jessica says? Is that the right way to frame this?
It's interesting, Jessica, because I listened very closely to what you were saying in terms of separating the types of crimes. It is a crime to come into the United States illegally, and that is not a political determination. That is a legal one. Yeah. And so if we set our immigration policies in place and we are consistent with them, that actually is more humanitarian than not. Yeah. No matter how you might feel as a parent or anything else, it's that consistency in treating everybody the same so that you offer answers. What the president has said, and it's interesting to hear him say it rather than Democrats, when you could argue that it's more their issue because this came into play more so with the Dreamer Act and all of that with Obama, with our former Democrat president. But, you know, when you look at this and you say, the president is saying, I want to give a final answer when it comes to that portion of immigration. I want to give a final answer on visa lottery. I want to put certain things into play, take the guesswork out, put consistency back in. The question is that more humanitarian, Giano, or just let it be a free-for-all and those people who can manage to hide and stay and possibly even be in harm's way themselves?
I like what you said, equality of the law. So wherever you're from, it makes no difference. You'll be treated equally. You know, I had an opportunity to meet with Attorney General Jeff Sessions twice, and I met with him last month, and we talked about a number of issues. But one thing I can say, he's definitely a law and order attorney general, and there's no compassion when it comes to applying the law. That's just what it is. And one thing I can say is he's right. He's talking about applying the laws on the books when it comes to this. One number that we've been talking about when we talk about the Dreamers is 800,000, right? There was the USA Today came up with a number, and they said there's 3.6 million Dreamers in the U.S.
Right. But the president have bumped that number already up to 1.8 million
for citizenship.
Right, for citizenship. I mean, look at how far it was.
3.6, right? So we look at over 3 million.
Well, the 11 million number is far too low. They've been stuck at that number for 10 years.
So where are Democrats on this issue is my point. Where are they?
I think that, frankly, they're all over the place, and some are willing to deal on this. Certainly, Dreamers have pushed a lot, like Luis Gutierrez.
Shouldn't they be in one place and advocate for better immigration policy that's clear and fair to everybody?
Yes, I think they could agree on that, but there are different definitions of what that means. And that's the same on the Republican side as well. You have Republicans who go Gang of Eight style, and you have Republicans who say, I want to round up every single person who's been here for 10, 20, 30 years. It doesn't matter.
There's a small minority of that. But
they're out there, and Jeff Sessions is one of them.
Well, we got to go on that note.
Bye.
All right. We're awaiting a major announcement from President Trump. Will the U.S. remain in the controversial Iran nuclear deal? Plus, big primary day in 4 critical states as President Trump makes his pick for West Virginia, and he says it's anyone but Don Blankenship, whether that could backfire.
We're going to win. We're excited about the momentum. We're excited that President Trump gave us a shout out.
And it's that 85% of the people that don't like the establishment, so we will win tomorrow.
I plan to win this race, and we're just going to keep working hard until the final bell rings.
Here it is, Fox News Alert, as we await the president to tell us what exactly is happening with his decision on Iran today. As that happens in the 2 p.m. hour, we will bring it to you live here on Fox News Channel. Will he recertify that deal or step the United States away from it? Keep watching.
Fox News Alert. Voters heading to the polls in 4 states that could test President Trump's clout with GOP voters, particularly in West Virginia. President Trump urging fellow Republicans to vote against former coal exec Don Blankenship, who has been to prison. Blankenship saying he is, quote, Trumpier than Trump and not backing down. Okay. So there are 4 states with primaries today. It has, at least to me, felt like this is the only one that's going on here in West Virginia. Giano, as our guest here, what do you think happens in the end? Is Trumpier than Trump headed to Mansion Land?
I think the president has learned a lesson from his past failings when it comes to Roy Moore in Alabama. I think that Joe Manchin, who is currently the sitting senator there, is very popular, and I know that there's 10 seats that's being targeted by Republicans in areas that Democrats, well, President Trump won in Democrat areas. So
by a
lot. So this is a very important seat. And just the fact that this is a great example as to what we can do in terms of moving forward with the strategy. This impeachment talk that's been coming up across the spectrum is something that's very serious. And I spoke with a member of the House of Representatives recently who said that if we don't get the Senate, if we don't keep the Senate and we lose the House, then there can be some very serious implications. So this is beyond just moving the president's agenda forward. This can go into the impeachment conversation if we don't pick up seats or maintain the control of the Senate.
So, Rachel, is this a place where the president should or should not step in? Because what he did was draw attention to a race that now is split among three people, you know, statistically. I think Blankenship is up by a couple points.
He has, and I don't think he should step in. I don't. And much, I know you worked for Governor Romney. When Romney ran against Obama in that second term, Romney felt like a pre-Obama candidate in a post-Obama world. And when I saw the debate between the Virginia candidates, or West Virginia candidates, I didn't know anything about any of them. Right. But it struck me that the other two candidates were pre-Trump candidates, and that Blankenship was so authentic. I remember they asked all three of them really difficult questions, and the two other candidates did the sort of politician talking point where they avoided the difficult question, didn't answer directly. And the other guy who had really the worst thing on his, prison and people who died in his mind, he answered very directly to the people. And I think this is a new era of authenticity, and authentic candidates will be rewarded. And so I think it's a little dangerous for the president to expend his capital against Blankenship on this one.
We do have to take a stand, though. I mean, this is a man who uses racist language. He's talking about Mitch McConnell, China people. Wow. He calls him Cocaine Mitch, which is a complete fallacy about his wife's family's shipping company here. I do think the president should have stepped in to at least be on the record, not like he was for Roy Moore, an accused pedophile. But Katie, I'm curious as to your thoughts in Ohio, because that's a race I'm really interested in. Where
I was just reading that 8 million voters, and they're expecting north of 1.6 million to vote today.
Yeah,
in Ohio.
It's going to, because Sherrod Brown he's always been my dark horse, certainly for a VP candidate. So how do you think it shapes up there?
I think he has a pretty good chance, and obviously Republicans are paying close attention to it, but I agree with you that West Virginia is something that we've had a lot more attention focused on, and because the president has gotten involved and said Blankenship shouldn't be voted for, I'm wondering if he wins tomorrow night, whether the president then will campaign for him and pull back those comments.
Well, and I had mentioned in West Virginia something that we might see is Joe Manchin go a little bit farther to the right.
Right.
He might look over it like a Conor Lamb down in Pennsylvania.
I'm a Republican now. I'm finally changing my party affiliation.
A little bit more, which makes November real complicated.
Well, Joe Manchin votes with Trump 60% of the time.
Yeah.
Not on Obamacare and tax cuts,
at times as well.
We have to go.
Me too, and I feel so bad. They had taken you, and I stepped in, and
it's okay. I feel like people would prefer